Ahmed Al-Zura, despite his Harvard PhD, had grown used to the whispering and the sideways glances in Isabella Thorne's futuristic laboratory. The Kufi on his head and the mop in his hands were a contradiction the science elite couldn't reconcile. But tonight, as the billionaire CEO lay dying from a pathogen no drug could touch, Ahmed would have to choose. Use his secret, faith-based brilliance to save the woman who despised him, or let her die to protect the secret that could destroy his family. Fire, don't let the algorithms decide what stories you see. Subscribe and join the channel to unlock the full truth of this shocking investigation. Fire. But let's go back to where it all began. The scent of bleach and sterile alcohol was the air Ahmed breathed. A cruel irony, given the six-figure research grants he used to breathe in Boston. His uniform, a coarse gray jumpsuit, felt like a constant reminder of his fall from grace. He pushed the heavy, humming floor polisher across the polished quartz floor of the Thorne Biolab's main atrium, the rhythmic whirring drowning out the last shreds of his self-pity. This was the headquarters of Isabella Thorne, the 40-year-old pharmaceutical titan whose revolutionary cancer drugs had made her the most powerful woman in modern medicine. She was a self-made icon, relentless, brilliant, and utterly merciless, especially toward those she deemed failures. Ahmed was now firmly in that latter category. A bureaucratic nightmare stemming from a canceled post-9/11 era research visa, compounded by a last-name paranoia that followed him everywhere, had stripped him of his tenure-track position and left him stranded with a family to feed. Isabella Thorne's empire was the only place that would grant him a job, but only one: custodian, night shift. He paused near the secure double doors leading to the A-Wing, the exclusive research facility where the real work, the life-saving, career-making work, happened. He kept his eyes lowered, adjusted the small, white Kufi cap nestled over his dark hair, a silent declaration of his identity that seemed to offend the secular, white-tiled purity of the lab. He knew the whispers. Al-Zura? Sounds familiar. The cleaning guy? Why does he always look so intense? And the worst, the one he overheard from Thorne's chief of research, Dr. Colin Mercer. We can't hire a man with a beard and a PhD named Ahmed to handle proprietary nanoagents. Too much liability. Let him clean the toilets where he belongs. Tonight, however, the A-Wing doors were ajar, a glaring violation of protocol. Inside, the usual controlled chaos was replaced by a rigid, terrifying silence. Dr. Mercer, usually a paragon of arrogance, was hunched over a console, his expensive suit rumpled, his face glistening with a desperate sweat. He looked up, spotting Ahmed. His eyes, already red-rimmed, narrowed in disgust. "What are you doing here, Zura? Get out. This is highly classified." Ahmed stopped the polisher, the sudden silence deafening. "The protocol ledger is flashing a stage 4 containment breach alarm, doctor, and the temperature is spiking in the cold storage units. I'm supposed to alert security." He knew the rules better than anyone. He'd briefly reviewed the security architecture when he started. Mercer slammed a hand down on the console. "Security is already handling it. It's an internal microorganism leak. Nothing for you to worry about. Just a highly aggressive, drug-resistant strain of lupus that flared up." He paused, his composure finally cracking. "It's not just a flare-up. It's Isabella. She was self-testing a new gene therapy. Something went wrong. Her entire immune system is on a runaway path. We can't stabilize her, Al-Zura. Nothing is working." Ahmed felt a cold, professional curiosity override his personal resentment. "Which strain? The E3, Delta variant? I published a theoretical paper on its mutational vectors 4 years ago." Mercer laughed, a short, bitter bark of disbelief. "You? Published? You push a mop, Zura. Stop playing games. Just clean the spill near Bay 7 and disappear. The last thing we need is a janitor distracting us from a billion-dollar crisis." He turned back to the console, dismissing Ahmed completely. But Ahmed didn't move. He knew the E3, Delta lupus strain. It wasn't a flare-up. It was a biological weapon in miniature, capable of hyper-accelerated cellular self-destruction. And he knew Mercer was lying about the cold storage spike. That spike meant one thing. The unique, rare compound that Thorne Biolabs used as a final resort stabilizing agent was now inert. Ahmed took 2 deliberate steps toward Mercer, ignoring the fear that prickled his skin. "Doctor," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "if you're dealing with E3 delta, the only viable pathway is a full-spectrum systemic reset, not a stabilizing agent. And given the time frame, you don't have 20 minutes to synthesize the necessary compound." Mercer spun around, his face dark with fury. "How dare you? You have no authorization to read that data, let alone comment on it. You know what? Get out. Get out, or I'll call security and tell them you're trying to access proprietary information." "You already are on the phone with the head of the security detail, Doctor." A new voice cut through the tension. It was Isabella Thorne's private assistant, Vera Chun, emerging from the A-Wing's inner sanctum. She was impeccably dressed, ice-cold, and held a satellite phone, its mic still active. "And I just heard Dr. Mercer threaten a breach of ethics violation against an employee who was correctly following emergency protocol." Vera looked at Ahmed, her expression unreadable. "Zara, is your name Ahmed Al-Zara?" "Yes, ma'am," Ahmed confirmed. "Mercer," Vera snapped, ignoring the stunned scientist. "Your team failed. You had 3 hours to find a solution. You produced nothing but panic. Thorne is deteriorating rapidly. She is now asking to speak to the janitor." Mercer's jaw dropped. "The janitor? Are you insane? He's a conspiracy risk. He's the one we suspect of." Vera cut him off with a look that promised a swift, brutal career termination. "The patient's request is non-negotiable. She is lucid, but she is also dying. Zara, you're coming with me. If you distract her, if you waste her time, or if you even think about contaminating her sterile environment, I will have you stripped of every credential you ever earned and deported before dawn. Are we clear?" Ahmed nodded once. He followed Vera deeper into the A-Wing, leaving the sweating, defeated Dr. Mercer behind. The air grew heavier, thick with the metallic tang of illness and the terrifying silence of absolute desperation. He was walking into a sterile, soundproof room where a dying billionaire lay, ready to be judged not by his education, but by the label society had slapped on his forehead. The Kufi suddenly felt less like a symbol of faith and more like a bullseye. Vera Chun moved with the brisk, efficient silence of a professional assassin. She led Ahmed not to a clean room, but into Isabella Thorne's private medical suite, a glass-walled enclosure positioned high above the main research floor. The view was breathtaking, a dizzying panorama of the sprawling city lights. But inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Isabella Thorne was confined to an automated medbed, surrounded by screens displaying horrifyingly erratic vital signs. The tubes and wires seemed to barely hold her together. Her skin, usually vibrant and tanned, was alarmingly pale, and her eyes, though still sharp, held the unmistakable light of impending death. "She is requesting a private consultation," Vera stated, her voice devoid of emotion as she scanned Ahmed with a handheld device, ensuring he wasn't carrying anything metallic or, ironically, biological. "You have 5 minutes. Do not touch anything. Do not mention your background unless she asks." The word background hung in the air, a thinly veiled reference to his appearance, his faith, his name. Vera then retreated to the soundproof observation booth, leaving Ahmed alone with the most powerful and prejudiced woman he had ever met. Isabella Thorne spoke first, her voice a raspy whisper, but still carrying the weight of command. "So, the legendary janitor. Al-Zara, I remember your employment file. PhD from Harvard, specializing in molecular synthesis and computational biology. A remarkable resume for a man who scrubs biohazard toilets." She offered a weak, mocking smile. "Tell me, Ahmed, does cleaning the mistakes of lesser minds make your faith stronger or weaker?" Ahmed took a deep breath, ignoring the barb. He moved his gaze from the flickering monitors to her face, projecting professional calm. "My faith, Ms. Thorne, is not relevant to the E3 Delta lupus strain currently destroying your T-cells. But my knowledge of it is." That shocked her. The self-testing gene therapy she was using was top secret. "How do you know the strain?" Dr. Mercer said it was a flare-up. "The data screens show a runaway cytokine storm consistent with E3 Delta's unique aggression. I also noticed the cold storage spike." You needed the deserine isomer stabilizer to buy you time, and it failed because your freezer unit was momentarily compromised. Am I wrong? Isabella's sharp eyes widened, a flicker of grudging respect mixing with her contempt. You noticed the cold storage spike from the hallway? From a custodian's console? My eyes are trained to see patterns, Ms. Thorne, whether in laboratory data or in dust accumulation. She pushed herself up slightly, wincing. Fine, let's cut the pretense. My entire team, the best minds money can buy, including the idiot Mercer, failed. They cannot synthesize a full-spectrum, systemic reset compound in time. You claimed you could. Why? Ahmed hesitated. This was the moment. The secret he had kept locked away for years. The one that offered both the cure and the destruction of his family's already fragile life in America. He looked at her, brilliant, dying, and judging his faith over his genius. The reset compound is not purely synthetic, Ms. Thorne. The E3 Delta variant is resistant to typical modern pathways because its mutation rate is tied to cellular memory. To break the cycle, you need a compound that interacts with the body at a foundational, cellular level, a kind of biological hard reset. And you have it, she demanded, desperation overriding pride. I have the formula, yes. It is based on a forgotten methodology. Tibai Nabawi, prophetic medicine, combined with advanced nanotechnology. The core active ingredient is a stabilized extract of Nigella sativa, black seed oil, that is loaded into a proprietary quantum dot nano capsule. Isabella Thorne stared at him, then let out a weak, hysterical laugh. Black seed oil? You're going to cure the most advanced form of lupus with a mystical kitchen spice? This is why I didn't trust having men like you in my labs, Alzara. Superstition masquerading as science. Her voice turned harsh. Get out. You wasted my time. Ahmed held her gaze, refusing to flinch. I understand your skepticism, but the nanocapsules allow the active anti-inflammatory compound to bypass the immune defense mechanism that E3 Delta has co-opted. Mercer's compounds are fighting the disease. Mine addresses the biological memory. It is not superstition. It is a decade of my private, uncredited research that I conducted while sweeping your floors. Prove it, she commanded, the single word hanging in the air. I need proof this isn't just a desperate ploy by an aspiring terrorist to gain access to my proprietary research. Ahmed reached into his jumpsuit pocket, retrieving a small, leather-bound notebook he always carried, his personal research journal. It was worn, its pages filled with elegant Arabic calligraphy detailing complex chemical structures alongside quotations from ancient texts. I built the final phase nanocapsules 2 months ago, using waste material from Bay 9 that you discarded. The preliminary results are on page 47. You can verify the spectral analysis against your discarded materials. Isabella Thorne looked at the leather-bound book with profound distaste, seeing the Arabic script, the weariness of an object of private devotion. She hesitated, then snapped at Vera through the intercom. Chun, get Mercer back here. Tell him to verify the spectral signatures on page 47 of a janitor's ledger. Now, Ahmed watched the numbers on Thorne's monitor drop into critical zones. Her heart rate was spiking, her blood pressure plummeting. The 5-minute window was shrinking into seconds. He knew what Mercer would do. If the data was real, Mercer would steal the discovery and frame Ahmed for attempted murder. If the data was fake, Ahmed would be arrested instantly. Ms. Thorne, Ahmed said softly, Mercer will never validate my work. He would rather see you die than see a man wearing a Kufi save your life using a method he dismisses as medieval. You must choose now. The compound is already synthesized. It's stored in my locker, labeled cleaning supplies. You take it now, or you die waiting for scientific validation from a biased source. Isabella stared at him, the battle between her arrogance and her primal will to live raging in her eyes. The monitor screamed a high-pitched alarm. The terms, she gasped, her hand clutching the sheet. The marriage. If you cure me, I will make you my husband. I will give you everything. My name, my power, my protection. The world will never question you again. Fail, and you will be facing a federal bioterrorism charge. Ahmed looked at the dying billionaire, at the screen screaming her impending doom, then at the small, private notebook in his hand. his life's work, his family's security, all hinging on one man's prejudice. He had to save her. But the price, to marry the woman who embodied everything he fought against, was almost too high to bear. The alarms inside the medical suite were now a continuous, shrill howl, a sound that cut through the silence of the massive research facility. Isabella Thorne's oxygen saturation dropped precipitously. Her desperate vow, the promise of marriage and protection, hung in the air, a dark contract forged in the face of imminent death. "Vera," Thorne gasped, her voice barely audible over the sirens. The janitor's locker. Code 7-4-1-2. Now, Vera Chun, still in the observation booth, looked at the monitors, then at Ahmed, her professional detachment finally wavering. She bolted out, her polished shoes clicking against the quartz floor as she ran toward the employee wing. Ahmed knew the risk was immense. He had just revealed not only his secret research, but the location of his life's work. If this failed, there would be no civil charges, only the absolute, cold judgment of a powerful woman's final act of revenge. He moved quickly to the medbed, ignoring the warnings flashing on the display. He placed a steady hand on Thorne's forehead, his thumb resting near her temple. "Ms. Thorne, I need you to focus on your breathing. Inhale slow, exhale slower." His voice was low, rhythmic, a counterpoint to the electronic chaos. "The nanocapsules need systemic absorption time. Your body is fighting me. You must trust the process." The door burst open. Dr. Colin Mercer, his face twisted in a mask of panic and rage, stormed in, flanked by two burly security officers, Harris and Diaz. "He's tampering with the patient." Mercer shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at Ahmed. "He's a disgruntled employee and a security risk. Arrest him now." Security Officer Harris, a mountain of a man with an intimidating scowl, immediately lunged for Ahmed's arm. "On the floor, Zura. Hands behind your back." Ahmed didn't flinch. He spoke directly to the security camera mounted high in the corner. "Commander of Security, this is Ahmed Al-Zara. Patient is in acute respiratory failure. Dr. Mercer's team failed to stabilize. I have verbal consent from Ms. Thorne to administer the only known treatment. Any physical intervention will result in the immediate death of the CEO. Record that." The simple, authoritative tone gave Harris pause. He looked at Thorne's convulsing body, then at Mercer. "He's lying. He's a janitor. He's trying to inject God knows what, some foreign contaminant." Mercer was hysterical, recognizing his own career dissolving in the high-pitched screams of the medbed. At that moment, Vera reappeared, breathless, clutching a small, unassuming white plastic bottle, the kind commonly used for floor cleaning concentrates. She thrust it into Ahmed's hand. "It's here. But this is labeled industrial floor Polish, non-toxic." "Are you serious?" "The label is a necessity for storage," Ahmed said, his fingers already working to pop the cap. Inside the bottle wasn't liquid, but a single, sealed syringe containing a viscous, dark, almost oily fluid. The faint, earthy aroma of Nigella sativa, black seed, wafted into the sterile air. "This is it," Ahmed confirmed. "The nanocapsule suspension. One shot, intravenous access." Mercer, seeing the syringe, screamed, "Stop! That is not an FDA-approved substance. You are committing premeditated murder, Zara. Officers, taser him. Now." Harris hesitated, his taser gun half raised. He looked at Isabella Thorne, who, despite her labored breathing, managed to lift one shaky finger and point it directly at Mercer. "Get out," Thorne whispered, her voice a terrifying, final command. "If I die, Mercer, I will haunt your career until you are flipping burgers." That was the last flicker of her conscious will. Her eyes rolled back, and the central monitor flatlined into a long, continuous tone, the silence of immediate cardiac arrest. Chaos exploded. Mercer roared in triumph and horror. "She's dead. Arrest him. He killed her." Harris and Diaz moved forward, restraints ready. Ahmed ignored them all. The moment Isabella Thorne flatlined, the compound's half-life became the only factor. He had perhaps 20 seconds before the total system collapse became irreversible. Moving with a practiced surgeon's speed, he swabbed a port line on her neck inserted the syringe, and depressed the plunger with steady pressure. The dark fluid vanished into her bloodstream. "I need exactly 8 seconds," Ahmed muttered, pulling the syringe out just as Harris grabbed his shoulder, the taser's dry sizzle filling the air. "You're under arrest for homicide, Al-Zahra," Harris shouted, wrestling Ahmed's arms behind his back. "Wait," Verachin cried out, staring in disbelief at the monitors. The flatline was still screaming, but a new, almost impossible signal was emerging beneath it, a tiny, rhythmic spike. "Electrical activity. Look at the cardiac monitor." Vera gasped. "The signal, it's returning. Irregular, but present. He's bringing her back." Mercer stumbled to the monitor, his face pale as he read the numbers. The heart rhythm was erratic, then slow, then, impossibly, it began to stabilize. The oxygen level started, fractionally, to rise. "It can't be," Mercer whispered, his denial collapsing into stunned silence. "A janitor, black seed oil. This is witchcraft." "It's P-cell repair, doctor," Ahmed said, his face inches from the floor, his hands locked in the metal restraints Harris had quickly applied. "The nanocapsules have begun the systemic reset. She will live." The silence in the room was heavier than the flatline had ever been. Isabella Thorne was breathing, alive, saved by the very man the entire scientific community had relegated to sweeping floors because of his faith and his name. But the triumph was short-lived. A new message flashed across one of Thorne's proprietary communication screens. A red, high-priority alert from the Department of Homeland Security's Domestic Threat Assessment Division. The message was brief, devastating, and entirely directed at Ahmed. "Active warrant issued for Ahmed Al-Zahra. Priority, high-value target. Charge, unauthorized possession and administration of bioweapon-capable nanotech. Source of information, confidential." Ahmed felt a cold wave wash over him. The confidential source could only be one person, Dr. Colin Mercer, who had likely preemptively reported Ahmed's research to bury his own failure. Mercer hadn't just insulted Ahmed's faith. He had weaponized the entire state security apparatus against him. Harris immediately released the grip on the restraints, his expression shifting from anger to genuine terror. "Bioweapon? What the hell have you done, Zahra?" "I saved her life," Ahmed stated, the metal of the handcuffs digging into his wrists. "And now, someone is trying to use my brilliance and my identity to destroy me. The choice is yours, officer. Arrest the man who saved the CEO, or find the man who framed me." In the medbed, Isabella Thorne's eyes slowly fluttered open. She saw the restraints on Ahmed's wrists, the panic on the faces around her, and the terrifying red text on her private screen. The billionaire was alive, but the janitor was now a wanted man. The contract of marriage had been fulfilled on one side, but the price of protection was about to be collected at gunpoint. "Adachla, go." The tension in the sterile suite was a tangible, suffocating weight. Officer Harris, momentarily paralyzed by the conflicting realities, the dead CO was now breathing, yet the savior was labeled a bioweapon threat, fumbled with the restraints on Ahmed's wrists. "Bioweapon," Harris stammered, his eyes darting between the recovering CEO and the screen flashing the DHS warning. "Zahra, if this is a trick." "It is not a trick, officer," a new, strong voice cut in. Isabella Thorne, though weak, was fully awake, her mind immediately grasping the tactical reality. She ripped the oxygen mask from her face, her eyes fixed on Ahmed's handcuffed wrists. "Vera, contact my security counsel, Elias Vance. Tell him I need a full corporate team mobilized for an immediate, hostile takeover of the DHS investigation. Now, and get those cuffs off him, Harris. This man just saved my life." Harris hesitated, looking at the bright, red warning on the screen. "Ma'am, the DHS notice overrides your corporate authority. We have to follow federal protocol. He's a priority target. Federal protocol is about to meet a $20 billion legal team." "Officer," Thorne spat, the return of her voice a terrifying mix of relief and fury. "You can follow protocol and arrest the man who cured me, or you can follow my direct order and save your job. Choose." Harris reluctantly unlocked the cuffs, the metal clanking softly onto the quartz floor. Ahmed rubbed his wrists, his eyes on the one man who hadn't moved. Dr. Colin Mercer, who stood by the console, a smug, venomous look replacing his initial panic. It doesn't matter, Thorne, Mercer sneered, crossing his arms. I already gave the DHS the full data package. I explained his history, his family's known ties to certain regions, his unorthodox research methods, and the fact that he used an unregistered, undocumented compound that he kept in a bottle labeled floor Polish. You call it cure. They call it terrorist bioexperimentation. That wire transfer we found in his file will seal the deal. Ahmed finally addressed Mercer, his voice quiet, but sharp enough to pierce the corporate tension. You didn't just frame me to hide your failure, Mercer. You used my faith and my surname to weaponize the government's pre-existing bias. You knew the moment they saw Alzura and unregistered nanotech, they wouldn't ask questions. It's about liability, Ahmed, Mercer countered, his tone condescending. I was protecting the company from a man who uses ancient superstitions to run black market science. You gave them the narrative, Zura. I just delivered it. The narrative is already failing, Mercer, Thorne said, leaning forward. She pointed a remote at the main screen, bringing up her own proprietary system. The compound isn't a bioweapon. It's a miracle cure. And I am about to release the full spectral analysis to the CDC, the NIH, and the global press. By the time DHS gets here, they'll be arresting the man who cured the world's most powerful CEO, a public relations disaster even they can't survive. The moment Thorne spoke, the doors slammed open again. It wasn't the police, but a heavily armored DHS tactical team, led by a grim-faced agent, Vanessa Cruz. Drop to your knees, Alzara. Hands behind your head now. Cruz's voice was amplified by a hidden speaker, and her team's rifles were leveled at Ahmed. Isabella Thorne struggled to sit up fully, throwing off the medical sheet. Agent Cruz. Stop. I am Isabella Thorne. I was the victim, and this man is my savior. He is under my protection. Agent Cruz didn't blink. Ms. Thorne, with all due respect, your status does not grant you the right to obstruct a federal investigation into potential domestic terror threats. Ahmed Alzara, you are under arrest for suspicion of unauthorized bioengineering and potential intent to harm. Harm, Thorne cried, gesturing to her own recovering body. He healed me. If he intended harm, I would be dead. He only acted after Dr. Mercer's incompetence left me flatlining. That man, Agent Cruz said, gesturing toward Mercer, provided us with evidence indicating Mr. Alzura was operating a hidden, unregistered lab, using suspicious offshore funds, and experimenting with unique molecular delivery systems labeled floor Polish. We have probable cause to believe his cure was merely a Trojan horse for a long-term bioattack, or, at best, an elaborate extortion scheme. Mercer smiled triumphantly. His framing had worked. He had transformed a medical breakthrough into an act of terror by exploiting the fear associated with Ahmed's identity. The extortion scheme is actually the opposite, Agent, Ahmed said, standing slowly and calmly, his kufi perfectly centered on his head. He looked directly at Isabella Thorne. Ms. Thorne is a witness to the full story. I gave her the cure, and she gave me her word. If I cured her, she would marry me, granting me her protection, her name, and her immunity from the constant prejudice. A stunned silence fell over the room. Agent Cruz's expression hardened from suspicion to incredulity. Marriage? Are you claiming this is an elaborate attempt to gain residency through marriage fraud? Thorne nodded, her eyes blazing with defiance. I claim nothing. I confirm it. The arrangement is valid. He saved my life. He gets my name. Any legal action against my fiancé, Ahmed Alzara Thorne, is an attack on my person and my company. Mercer finally cracked. This is insane. A farce. He's a janitor. She's covering up a biological incident because she's emotionally compromised. On the contrary, Dr. Thorne said, her gaze fixed on Agent Cruz. I'm being perfectly logical. I will not have my personal savior arrested on spurious charges initiated by a disgraced employee. You arrest him, Agent Cruz, and my first act as a newly engaged CEO will be to file a billion-dollar lawsuit against the DHS for religious and ethnic profiling, using every minute of video footage we have in this room, which shows the man you are targeting saving my life while being repeatedly mocked for his name and faith. Agent Cruz lowered her rifle fractionally, her tactical certainty collapsing under the weight of an unprecedented corporate and legal threat. She was no longer facing a simple janitor. She was facing the combined power of the Thorn Biolabs empire, mobilized by a CEO who had just been saved from death and was furious at the prejudice she had witnessed. The tables had completely turned. Ahmed had cured the billionaire, and in doing so, had unlocked the protection he needed to survive the very system designed to destroy him. Adachla. The tactical silence of the DHS team was a more powerful weapon than their rifles. Agent Cruz, realizing the catastrophic political fallout of arresting Isabella Thorne's savior moments after he healed her, lowered her weapon entirely. She looked at Ahmed, then at Thorne, then back at the defeated Dr. Mercer. "Ms. Thorne," Agent Cruz said, her voice dropping the tactical authority. "We need to verify the source of the funds and the nature of the compound." Dr. Mercer's testimony. Dr. Mercer's testimony is the product of professional envy and institutional Islamophobia. Thorne cut in, her voice now regaining its signature strength. He saw a man in a Kufi who knew more than he did, and he weaponized prejudice to cover his own colossal failure. "Ahmed," she turned to him, the formal distance gone. "Show them." Ahmed nodded, the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. He walked to Mercer's console, tapping the screen to bring up the financial data Mercer had used to frame him. "The unexplained wire transfer of $850,000, Ahmed announced, pointing to the screen. Mercer stated this was payment for industrial espionage. Agent Cruz leaned in, her interest piqued. "And what was it, Mr. Alzara?" "It was the advance for my family's application to buy a home in this city," Ahmed stated simply. "My entire life savings, which I had entrusted to my brother-in-law, a real estate agent, for a down payment. The funds originated from the sale of my late mother's property in London, which I had kept secret to avoid the security scrutiny I knew it would bring. The Cayman Islands intermediary was my brother-in-law's legal maneuver to bypass international currency regulations. It wasn't offshore payment for terror. It was simply a Muslim immigrant trying to buy a house." The sheer banality of the truth was devastating. Mercer's entire narrative, the fear, the espionage, the bioweapon, collapsed into a simple, heartbreaking act of a man trying to provide for his family while constantly fearing judgment. Isabella Thorne pointed at Mercer. "Mercer, you had access to the full accounting of my brother-in-law's firm. You knew this was a housing transaction. You deliberately withheld the context to manufacture a terror narrative against my fiancée. That is not just corporate liability. That is slander and potentially a federal hate crime." Mercer, utterly broken, stumbled backward. I just thought, why would a janitor have that kind of money? It didn't make sense." "That," Ahmed said, his voice calm, "is the core of the problem, doctor. You assumed that a man with a beard, a modest cap, and an Arabic name couldn't possibly be both a brilliant scientist and a responsible homeowner." Agent Cruz looked at the DHS screen, then at Mercer, then back at Ahmed. "Mr. Alzara, Dr. Mercer's initial report stated you also used a black market methodology, the Nigella sativa treatment. Is that part of a wider, unregistered research network?" "It is part of a library of knowledge that predates modern pharmaceuticals by 1,000 years, Ahmed replied. "I studied both Harvard chemistry and the principles of Tibbi Nabawi. My breakthrough was realizing that the ancient knowledge of natural compounds could be the perfect vehicle for modern nanotechnology. The solution wasn't black magic, Agent. It was simply the most elegant science, hidden in plain sight, dismissed because of its cultural source." Isabella Thorne reached out and took Ahmed's hand, her touch surprisingly warm and steady. "The time for questioning my fiancé is over. The immediate concern is the cure." She addressed Vera. "Release the full spectral data on the P-cell repair nanocapsules immediately. Issue a global press release stating that the cure for E3 delta lupus and potentially all aggressive autoimmune diseases was discovered by Dr. Ahmed Alzara, my future husband and the head of the new Thorn Biolabs Global Tolerance Initiative." The announcement, the formal acceptance, the validation, the immediate elevation from janitor to global scientific leader, hit the room with the force of an earthquake. "And Dr. Mercer," Thorne continued, her voice cold steel, You are terminated immediately. Your access codes are revoked. Security, escort him out. I will personally ensure the DHS, the FTC, and every medical board hears how you risk my life to perpetuate a career-saving act of bigotry. As security officers moved to detain a whimpering Mercer, Agent Cruz lowered her head slightly in an acknowledgement of the new reality. Mr. Alzara, Dr. Alzara, we will need to take a statement, but the warrant is rescinded. We will be investigating the false report. Ahmed looked down at Isabella Thorne, the woman he would now marry. She was his protector, his benefactor, and now, his only shield against a biased world. He had paid the highest price for his vindication, his personal freedom and privacy, but he had also gained the power to change the narrative for countless others. I will provide a full statement, Ahmed said, looking at the city lights twinkling outside the glass walls. But first, I need two things. First, a moment to pray, as is my custom. And second, I need to know where I can find the best international law firm specializing in defending individuals against systemic prejudice. Because the cure isn't just for Isabella. It's for the institution that let this happen. The final, silent moment between the billionaire and the janitor-turned-doctor was the most profound. Their alliance, born of a desperate contract, was now a formidable partnership against the forces of prejudice. Ahmed had healed the body of the corporation CEO, but the work of healing the corporate soul, the part that judged the Kufi over the PhD, was just beginning.